Okay, so let me share with you some other techniques of correcting an image through curves or levels. Now, again, I just want to share with you what I typically do is make a clone copy, dragging this down to here, double clicking this, calling this WC, not for WC fields, for working copy. Make sure you target this layer, make a change, save a change. All right. Now, we can use that same technique we used for the truck to correct this image as well. This image is not bad looking, but there's some highlights maybe we want to get rid of. We just want to basically make these colors pop out a little more so you can actually see the wooliness of the hat. So how can we do this? Well, again, we're going to go down here to adjustment layer and go to threshold. And we're going to slide this all the way down to the left, which is going to show us one of our darkest pixels. Right? Make sure our eyedropper is in the 3-point eyedropper. And I'm just going to click right here. Now, again, we can play with this all day long and get like the darkest of the dark, but this is pretty dark. I'm just going to click right there. Then I'm going to drag this up to the right until I get the highlights. And I'm probably, it's probably going to be her cheek or her tooth. So let's say her cheek area. In fact, let's just back it out a little bit. And right there, now if you have to, Command key plus, Control plus zooms in. And I can just say right there is going to be 0.2. All right. So I have eyedropper 1, eyedropper 2. I go back to my working copy. I turn my layers off, and I fit window Command 0. All right. So this is not a bad looking image, but we can always improve on it. So how can we do that? We go back here to our adjustment layers. So I'm going to go to adjustment layers. In this particular case, I'm going to pick curves. Now I'll explain the difference between curves and levels in a second. Okay, curves just give you much more finer detail. This is a grid system. The way that this curve works here, this is shadow, this is a quarter tone, this is a 3/4 tone, this is a highlight. Now, this is working quarter tones across the board. If you hold down the Option key and click, you can create 16 tones, 16th of a tone. Option key, click goes back. So here's our objective, similar to what we did with the truck. We're going to go to our white eyedropper tool, and we're going to pick the whitest of the white right there. We're going to go to our black eyedropper tool. We're going to pick the blackest of the black, which is right there. Now, it's a subtle difference. You don't have to go totally nuts with this, but I'm just going to fit this in window Command 0. I'm going to zoom out for a second. The F key once, the F key twice. Zoom back in, and this is what we have. This is what we had. A subtle difference, but you can actually see the wooliness of this hat. Right now it looks kind of a little washed out. Right now it's a little more, it just pops a little bit better. That's one way we can do this. Okay, let's hit the F key again. Now what I want to do is revert this to the last time I saved it. So I'm just going to revert the save, which before I made that adjustment layer. It's a good habit to get into. Make a change, save a change, but also keep on top of when you're saving things, when you're not saving things. Now, I want to share with you another very powerful technique of how I can selectively adjust. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, in general, you don't want to get in the habit of selecting, say, these pixels as opposed to these pixels, because you have to look at the entire tonal quality of an image. So what might be highlighted here can possibly affect back over here, and I don't want to do that. But one of the things I can do, a very powerful technique here, is I can go to the select menu and I can select color range. Now, in this particular case, based on these choices, these options here, I want to go to color and I want to select midtones. I want to affect my midtones. I'm going to click right there. Now, when I do that, I have a choice. Do I want to see the image? Do I want to see the selection? Well, it actually helps me to see the selection of the midtones. And I'm going to hit OK. Now, what that does is put this big grid selection here that I don't want to see. So under the View menu, View, Hide, Extras, Command H. Now, if you do this for the first time, it's going to say that you want to hide the edges, you want to hide Photoshop. I'm using it for hiding edges, Command H, Control H for Windows. Now, very important step here, it's still selected. If you're not sure that it's selected, hit the Delete key, you'll see that it just deleted those pixels. So now I can go back to my image adjustment. I'm going to go back to curves, and in this particular case, I'm going to affect just the midtones. So if I take midtone here and I drag up, it's going to highlight the midtones. If I drag down, it's going to make the midtones darker, 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 darker. Now it looks like she's been in the sun lamp too much. Now she's very bronzed. Now, what's really cool about CS6 and previous versions of CS4 and CS5 is I have custom presets. So as an example, I can come up here and I can say, make this increase contrast. And I get something like this. Now, if I want to make it a strong contrast, I get something like this. If I want to make this a medium contrast, I'll get something like this. Now, this is a good tool to learn from, because what's happening here, I'm going to reset this back. Option key, resets this back to normal. So I'm going to go to default and reset back to default. Okay, now, in general, where curve comes from is curve, you want to create an S curve, which means your highlights want to go more towards the midtones, and the shadows want to go more towards the midtones. As an example, if you go to, let's go to medium contrast, you'll see it's already starting to create an S curve. S curve. If I drag down this way, it creates more of an S. That's a very defined S curve. Now, this is getting too washed out, but I'm going to share with you, you can do that. You can also take your pencil and you can write your own curve. So I can say, okay, I want to take the midtones and make them, now this is totally screwing the whole thing up here, so I can go back to default here. But I'm just sharing with you that simple technique of how I can get my highlights and my shadows. Now, another technique, if I don't want to use curves gives you more precise, pristine movements of my pixel shift. If I go back here for a second, I'm going to take my curves, I'm going to undo that command, Option Z. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to go to levels. Now, for novice, levels might be a better tool to use. Now, keep in mind this is still selected. If you're not sure about that, hit the delete key and you'll see what it deletes. So I want to make sure that this is selected. Okay, so if I delete key, it's going to delete those pixels. So just understand it's still selected. Command H hides the selection. Command H shows the selection. Right, so I'm going to come back up here into my adjustment layer, double click. So this is selected, therefore it can be affected. So if you were to take your midtones, because the midtones are selected in this particular case, Command H hides, Command H shows. Windows up, you Control H toggles. So if I drag it this direction, it's going to take my midtones and just the midtones and make them darker. Now that's over exaggerated. If I go in this direction, it's going to make them lighter. Now, what I suggest you do here, back up here to default for a second, is you can actually hit the up arrow key, and I go nudge by nudge by nudge. Up arrow key is going to go towards shadows. Down arrow key is going to go towards highlights. So I get this nudges pixel by pixel by pixel, so I get the type of midtone effect I'm looking for. Now, as a technique here, what you can do is you can basically drag this with your mouse so it overreaches and then back down. Down arrow, the up arrow key is going to go in the left direction. Okay, so I just want to share with you those very basic, simple techniques of how I can adjust an image through curves and levels. We'll do a more in-depth study on this, but I just want to get your feet wet and feel comfortable with the program. Okay, so if I was to fit this in window, and the F key once and F key twice, here's what we have, and here's what we had. So this to this, a subtle change here. Now, the unfortunate thing about here is you can now see the imperfections of her face, little acne blemishes here. But all in all, it's a pretty good color correction. Command C undoes, Command C redoes. So that's a very cool technique to use curves and levels, but in this particular case, I'm using curves and levels in conjunction with the adjustment layer. And what I did here is I went to the select menu. So I'm going to deselect. Under the select menu, Command D deselects. Right now, nothing's selected. Now, if you don't want to know that shortcut, of course, you can just click off of this. So let's go back to the select menu again. So select color range. And in this particular case, we're going to pick the highlights. So it's going to pick the highlights of my image. Command H hides edges. So now when I double click in here, I can now take my highlights and I can make my highlights go this direction to make my highlights brighter, or I could take my shadows and move it in this direction. So basically it's going to make the highlights darker, it's going to make the highlights lighter. You can also do midtones. So sometimes affecting just the pixel range is a good idea, sometimes it's not. It depends on your objective, it depends on the tonal, T-O-N-A-L, tonal quality of your image. That's under the select menu. So that does it for this video. I will talk to you soon. I'll be posting more videos throughout the week. Have a good day. Carpe diem.